Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Hey, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism, in pursuit of trying to find out WTH, what the heck has happened in the past? What the heck is going to happen in the future? What the heck is going on right now? So I've been reading another book I got in the mail recently. OMG. Look how thick this book is. IBM and the Holocaust. The New York Times bestseller. I wonder if this video will be restricted or taken down by the people censoring YouTube or Yahoo or the internet. Will the computerized system gather more metadata on me and elevate the level of threat people who become aware of the truth are to the global world order? It's mind-boggling when you think about it. But when you go back to the past, World War II and IBM, in the Holocaust, you have to ask yourself, could it, would it happen again? Edwin Black, let's read from the back of the book. The acclaimed New York Times bestseller establishes beyond dispute that IBM Hollerith machines significantly advanced Nazi efforts to exterminate Jewry. And after reading this book and continuing my research, that was not the goal, to exterminate Jewry. The goal was to get them to move, to immigrate to Israel, elsewhere, where they could be used, even to America, to re-indoctrinate, to educate them, because 50% of the Jews in the world were anti-Zionist. They were a thorn in the Zionist foot. You know, when you have a thorn in the foot, what you have to do, you have to remove the thorn. So 50% of the Orthodox, God-fearing Jewish people who believed that God would provide for their new kingdom and future were opposed to the Zionist Jewish elite, also into the secret societies, Illuminati, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Bohemian Grove, and so many others, apparently into the cult, the proverbial Church of Satan. That's a lot to say. So even in the Jewish community, had this big battle, 50-50, according to Eustace Mullins. Sometimes they get tongue-tied. So there was a plan for the past 300 years called Zionism, creating a Jewish state, Israel. And 50% of the Jews weren't having it. Why would you want to leave Germany or any of these other countries, even Iraq, even Iran, anywhere? If you were doing really well and you had friends and family and were established for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, it would take some really serious, hard convincing to get you to leave. And there were elites behind the scenes doing that. Make no mistake about it. Hitler was put in place and financed by these same people who caused all the problems for the Orthodox Jews who did not want to leave. He was put in power by them. IBM and the Holocaust is a valuable contribution to the understanding of the Holocaust. Washington Post book world. An ugly story hidden for years, told by a master craftsman, compelling. It's a chilling lesson, you think? Miami Herald. IBM and the Holocaust is a disturbing book, all the more so because its author doesn't prescribe what should be done about sins committed more than half a century ago. It is left to the reader to decide. Is this hate speech? Chicago Times, Chicago Tribune. Published to extraordinary praise. This provocative international bestseller details the story of IBM strategic alliance with Nazi Germany. IBM and the Holocaust provides a chilling investigation into corporate complicity, and the atrocities witnessed raise startling questions that throw IBM's wartime ethics into serious doubt. Edwin Black's monumental research exposes how IBM and its subsidiaries helped create enabling technologies for the Nazis step by step, from the identification and cataloging programs of the 1930s to the selection of the 1940s, with a new afterword. The publishing event of last year is certain to generate even more controversy. The son of a Polish survivor, Washington-based Edwin Black is the author of the award-winning Holocaust finance investigation, The Transfer Agreement, and is an expert on commercial relations with the Third Reich. Now, what I just read here, you know what a template is? You have a template of something, let's say it's an eagle, and you lay it on a piece of wood and you draw it all out, and when you take the template off, you have a picture of an eagle. You can go to a wall and push the template up there and draw it, and you have an eagle. Well, this story I just told is a template. It's a picture of what happened in World War II. So look at it as a big template to what happened, a picture of what happened. And think about what I just said and lay it over to the reality of today. They have advanced technologies now. They're cataloging all the data on all of us now, the metadata, the facial recognition systems, and all the things they did back then with those technologies, they're doing again, but to the nth degree more intense. And I believe for the same purpose. Call me crazy, but let me read from the book and you decide. So the chapter I'm going to talk about is war cards. War cards. And you can see that I've been reading it. I have not read the entire book, but I have read what I'm going to talk about. You're talking about 541 pages, and I think what I want to talk about here will do the trick to let us see what was stamped on humanity back then is being stamped on humanity right now. What was prepared for back then since the 1930s for the 1940s event, World War II, is going on now preparing for the World War III event. Today, tomorrow, next month, next year, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, I don't know. None of us know. Let me read from the book. July 5th, 1937. Your Excellency, Adolf Hitler, Berlin. Before leaving Berlin, I wish to express my pride in and the deep gratitude for the high honor I received through the order with which you honored me, valuing fully the spirit of friendship which underlay this honor. I assure you that in the future as in the past, I will endeavor to do all in my power to create a more intimate bond between our two great nations. My wife and my family join in best wishes for you. Thomas Watson, International Business Machines, IBM. So apparently he had a meeting with Adolf Hitler's people, or Adolf Hitler, and he got an order, a contract to do things. And we already know today the corporations in America are elevated above the citizens, above the politicians, above the government and the military. They seem to be in control, the huge corporations. And apparently, like the stock market and the money system, the banking system, these huge corporations are controlled by these elitists. And even Tex Mars sent me a newsletter once about, 8 years ago, and I've mentioned this and shown it in previous videos. He said most of the international corporations, the CEOs are all Jewish. Well, I found that hard to believe. That's where I was 8, 9, 10 years ago. I didn't believe things like that. Come on, how could it be? So I went and got a binder, and I went and sought out the largest corporations, and I went on Wikipedia, wherever, and I figured out who the CEOs were, and Tex Mars was correct. I've showed this. I still have the binder somewhere. So these corporations, led by Jewish CEOs, international, huge, getting military contracts, involved in probably dumping the chemicals in the sky, the 5G microwave network, the computer systems, the beast computers, collecting metadata, YouTube, Google, Internet, you name it, RAND Corporation, all these huge corporations, hand in hand with the governments. Like I said, look what happened back then, look what's happening now. So you got a letter from IBM to Mr. Adolf Hitler. And now we have another letter here, July 4th, 1938. Mr. Thomas Watson, IBM Machines, International Business Machines, New York. Dear Sir, I must offer you my apologies for taking the liberty to write to you to request your kind attention to the following matter. Like many of the Jewish confession, people who confess they're Jewish, I am facing a terrible moment in life, and I am obliged to leave this country and to procure in another land my means of living. I am born on the 17th of June, 1906, and was educated in the elementary and high school in the country. During 8 years, until 1933, I have worked as an operator for the Hollerith punching machine for the Reich Statistical Office in Berlin, the Third Reich. Now I have spoken to Mr. Druns, the manager of Hollerith, one of IBM's divisions in Germany, company in Berlin, about my plans to find work abroad. Mr. Druns has advised me to write to you somehow with my plans, and I hope that with your kind help, I will be able to find work in a foreign country. No doubt, you know the conditions of living here, and it would be useless to give any further reasons for my immigration. I would be very grateful to you for your kind assistance, and please accept my anticipation in anticipating my thanks. Hoping to be favored with your reply, I remain sincerely yours, I.C. Meyer, Berlin. So in 1938, he says, for the past 8 years, he's been working for one of the IBM offices at a punch card machine location. And he's also saying, I don't have to tell you why I need to leave Germany. No doubt you know the conditions of living here. And it would be useless to give any further reasons for my immigration. So, during this period of time, just to tell you my understanding, and the other book that this author wrote, Edwin Black, called The Transfer Agreement, which I have that. I need to make a video on that. But apparently there was an alliance between the Zionists and the National Socialists. Remember, National Socialism is another word for communism. Socialism, communism created socialism. It's like leading people down a path to their doom, but promising them all the way they're going to get everything they want. Life is going to get better. Don't worry about working hard or if you're handicapped or whatever. You deserve all the stuff that they're withholding from you, those nasty business owners and other people, whoever they're targeting, the capitalists, etc., the Christians, etc. So people fall for that. So they had a transfer agreement and an alliance between Germany and the Zionists. And apparently, it's in writing, it's in this material. There was a unanimous agreement that it would be the best for everybody if the Jews left the country. But that's what the elites decided. 50% of the Jews in Germany weren't Zionists, weren't into the occult. They were God-fearing men. They worked at factories like this guy did. They owned clothes manufacturing companies and meat processing companies and all kinds of businesses and industries. And they were happy. They had mansions and large estates, and they were getting wealthy. And a lot of them had fled Ukraine and Poland and the Russian territories because of the Russian pogroms, the police action on the Jews. So they had fled to Germany, and they had found safe refuge, even huge success. So just to get them to pack up their bags and leave was not going to happen. Anti-Semitism had to be created. So before the story I'm about to read from happens, the Zionists and the Nazis had an agreement that it would be best for all if the Jews immigrated, preferably to Palestine, to create the state of Israel. This is a 300-year-old plan from now. Back then it was a 200-and-something-year-old plan. Started in the early 1700s. And before the 1700s, the word Jew, J-E-W, did not exist. The word anti-Semitism did not exist. These people who planned all this, created all this, they understand psychology. They had to put the guilt on people. They had to create the events. Like we're seeing these days with shootings and bombings, and then the politicians are ranting and raving about it's time to take action. We're the last country in the world to still allow our citizens to have guns. And the same thing with the passing of the lottery. When they asked the voters to vote on it, the voters turned it down. And one guy on TV said from the big corporations, not to worry, we just need to re-educate them. And a year and a year and a year passes, and more votes, and the billboards and newspaper editorials that the money would be used for schools, educating us. They finally got the lottery. And the same thing with the homosexual gay marriage. 2008, 60-70% of the people in America were opposed to it. They took the votes. I remember late at night driving from Florida to Maine, where I had purchased some property, listening to late night radio, and the announcer said, it'll never pass in America. 32% want gay marriage and 68% said no. And I remembered the situation with the lottery. I said, watch. They're going to continue hammering it in movies and on Ellen on TV, the show, and little kids talking about the two daddies and the education and educating us and educating us and educating us. And the Supreme Court finally said that the states can't ban gay marriage, and they have all this other propaganda everywhere these days, demonizing anybody who opposes it. So we didn't come to these decisions on our own. They hammered at the people, and they wore down the people, and people just threw up their arms. A lot of them, they even wore them out and turned them against religion. So they really didn't care, and they threw in their hands, and they said okay, and they indoctrinated the young children in the grade schools and other schools, colleges, whatever. Cartoons. I've seen the cartoons. 15 years ago, it was too funny. I had 4 or 5 little kids in the living room in Long Island, New York at my sister's house. And I saw Nancy Bear and Bobby Bear and Susie Bear, this little cartoon. And Bobby Bear says to Nancy Bear, I think Susie Bear said something to Nancy Bear, one girl to another. Who are you going out with this weekend on a date? And Nancy Bear says, I'm going out with Sally. And Susie Bear says, but wait a minute. Last week you went out with Bobby Bear. You can't go out with a boy bear last week and a girl bear next week. And little Susie Bear says, yes, I can. I can do whatever I want. This was the cartoons the kids were watching. I was stunned and standing up behind them in the living room. And apparently the kids were pretty smart. 7, 8 years old, 6 years old. A couple of them turned around and saw me watching and kind of blushed. They intuitively knew that this wasn't right. So they do know how to use psychology to brainwash us, control what we think. Okay, back to the book here. So remember, no doubt you know the condition of living here. So the conditions in Germany back in 1938 were getting quite horrific. No doubt, I'm not going to deny that. But I'm also going to say that from my research, the Zionists had made a deal with the Nazis. National Socialism. They even have a coin with the 6-pointed star, the Zionist symbol on one side, and the SWAT sticker on the other side, commemorating this deal, and even visits to Palestine. It was all cemented, and they were trying to get the Jews to line up, to immigrate out, to get on the ships, but they had a huge problem. A lot of Jews didn't want to leave. Even in Iran right now, they don't want to leave. But we see a war possibly looming in Iran. Iraq, they didn't want to leave. A deal was made with the president of Iraq to make conditions difficult for them many years ago. I've gone over that. So that they would leave. Argentina, the United States, all over the world, and even Theodore Herschel in his famous book, The State of Israel, said anti-Semitism is our friend. Because these people did not want to leave. 50% of the Jews all over the world were not pro-Zionist. And it appears the Zionists are in bed with the Kabbalists, the Communists, the Illuminati, these mystery religions, the synagogue of Satan, Lucifer worship, Baal, Moloch, and the symbols are everywhere. FYI. All right, to the book. Germany was bitter for the Jews. By 1937, thousands had escaped pasteurized immigrants as pasteurized immigrants. So by 1937, thousands of Jews had escaped the bitterness in Germany by becoming immigrants. But for those Jews remaining within the Reich, existence became a progressively fainter shadow of its former self. Driven from the small cities, Jews began to flood into Berlin, where they attempted to continue a fraction of the civilized life they once knew. Small things became important. A cup of coffee in a cafe, a stroll in the park, cinema on the weekend, an afternoon concert. These were the precious relics of normalcy German Jewry clung to. So prior to this intentional program, and it was the Illuminati Zionist elite who put Hitler in power, the Jews had a normalcy in Germany, and they were happy. But the Nazis, NA is National Socialism, and the ZI in the Nazis apparently is for Zionism, this relationship. And that came from Eustace Mullins. On the videos, you can go on archive.org and watch that. I've showed it. But the Nazis would not permit a moment of peace. So they would not permit a moment of peace. Theodore Herschel said anti-Semitism is our friend. They had a transfer agreement, and they wanted to create the state of Israel in Palestine. They had to get World War I and World War II to do it. In World War I, it was the Balfour Agreement. Britain reneged on it, so they needed World War II. And, of course, to finish things off, they had 9/11 so they could have a greater Israel. This is all part of a 300-year-old plan. They created the term Jew. They created the term anti-Semite. They took over the banking systems. It's controlled by these elite banksters, Illuminati, mystery religion. And apparently one of the common symbols, there's a couple of them, one is the all-seeing eye, and the other one is the five-pointed star, and another one interchangeably is the six-pointed star. All representations of this sun god religion, this mystery religion of the secret societies. And go look up some of William Cooper, Bill Cooper's videos, and he gets into that. And that's what probably got him in trouble and got him killed. Jews were subjected to unending acts of personal degradation, and they were marginalized. So this was all a plan prior to World War II. And apparently a contract with IBM to collect data on everybody, and an agreement and a coin with a transfer agreement. The national humiliation effort was more than a crudely unnoticed except within the borders of Germany. The campaign was a source of never-ending American newspaper articles, radio reports, including those in the New York Times. So all over America, I've gone over this, the newspapers were taking out these advertisements prior to World War II that 6 million Jews were in jeopardy in Europe. So they had the Jewish elite all over the world, newspapers, bankers, financing, with this worldwide planned attack on humanity, creating the situation so the whole world would be up in roars and try to solve the Jewish problem that they were having congressional hearings on. And that Henry Ford bought the Dearborn Independent newspaper and said the international Jew was the world's most foremost problem. And then look where we are today with Israel calling on the United States to start enforcing something called the Noahide laws coming out of the Sanhedrin. Don't believe a thing I say. Please go look it up. Write it down. Have a notebook. The Sanhedrin, the religious legal authorities for the Jews based in Israel, calling on President Donald Trump to start enforcing the Noahide laws, calling on American politicians to start creating laws so you can't talk about Jewish people, Zionism, boycotting Israel. And apparently all over Europe, those laws are already in place. If you do those things, you can get arrested, go to jail, lose all your assets, etc., etc. And then again, Israel recently calling on the United States and Putin of Russia to help rebuild King Solomon's temple so that they can start sacrificing animals again and maybe bring back some kind of Shekinah entity that apparently lived in the Ark of the Covenant, that they could open the lid and this beings would come out screeching and killing everybody, like if you've seen the Indiana Jones movie. Or the cloud of glory, some entity would show up in a cloud over the sacrificed animal, and sometimes a big beam of fire would come from the sky and consume the animal, or lightning bolts. Do you know about this religion called the Kabbalah? Encyclopedia Judaica says the Kabbalah is part of the cultural religious history of the Jews in the Encyclopedia Judaica. I had 6 or 7 of my videos about the Encyclopedia Judaica on anti-Semitism. I read directly from the Encyclopedia Judaica, published in English in 1972 in Israel. And YouTube took down 6 or 7 of the videos that I read straight from the Encyclopedia Judaica from. So the information is true, but they do not want us to discuss it and use it to use our common sense to kind of analyze what's going on in the world right now. They've moved too far ahead with all their propaganda and brainwashing everybody into the New Age philosophy and the anti-God, anti-Christian attitudes with social conditioning and teaching. So it is a battle. And when you get somebody out there trying to share the truth, they become a threat to this world where truth becomes treason. But let me read from the book some more. I can ramble on. But the Nazis would not permit a moment of peace. Jews were subjected to unending acts of personal degradation as they were marginalized. The national humiliation effort was more than a cruelly unnoticed except within the borders of Germany. The campaign was a source of never-ending American newspaper articles, radio reports, including those of the New York Times. So just like passing the lottery or getting the Supreme Court to act on gay marriage, back then they were using the media, propaganda, social conditioning to social condition all of the world to this atrocity happening to the Jews, that these same newspaper owners and elites had made agreements with Hitler of Germany, the Third Reich regime, to make it difficult for the Jews, according to my interpretation of what I'm reading here, and there's other documents I know, and listening to Eustace Mullins, and the many, many, many other books I've gone over. This will be series 270. Nazis would enter cinemas and demand all Jews rise so they could be escorted out. So prior to World War II, we talk about the atrocities during World War II, but nobody talks about the preparations and what was happening before, and the agreements of trying, in writing and acknowledged, that it would be best if the Jews were to separate from Germany and have a state of their own. Zionism. Coming right out of the Illuminati, the Rothschilds with all their money. No doubt about that. Nobody can deny what I'm saying here. Cafes catering to Jews were ordered closed and to patrons taken into custody. Local authorities disbanded virtually all Jewish athletic teams, musical societies, social clubs. Indeed, any gathering of more than 4 Jews in a single place was forbidden. Placarded park benches, so they had these little cards on the benches in the parks that Jews could not sit down. So they were making it very difficult for Jews, and they wanted them to get on the ships to go to Palestine. And apparently even into America, where they controlled our money supply since 1913. They controlled our country, our politicians, our presidents. So they were bringing them there, and after World War I, they were bringing them into New York, and that's why Henry Ford bought the Dearborn Independent and started telling all. Synagogues were shuttered and often razed. The Grand Principal Synagogue of Munich was replaced with a parking lot. And it also, when you read a book like this and you think about 1937, you have to also think about what else was going on in the world. Well, apparently, communism was running rampant in the United States. All kinds of chaos and accusation, McCarthy and all that, congressional hearings. And the communism, of course, came from all those people, from the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and the Zionists and the Illuminati, to try to destroy capitalism that they demonize, and Christianity, which they demonize. They are anti-God. So in the United States was a huge, and all over the world, many other places, was a huge communist campaign. Mind control, like I keep saying. Meanwhile, don't forget China, Asia, craziness going on there, millions and millions being killed. And in Russia, between World War I and World War II, they say up to 100 million Christians were being killed, a lot of them by starvation, and the Christian churches were being razed, demolished. So the complete takeover of Russia was at full force, and they were exterminating the Christians, up to 100 million. Some reports say 20 million, 25 million, 60 million, 66 million. Anyways, it's certainly more than the 6 million claimed during World War II, the Holocaust. In Russia, the Christians, at least 20, 25 million, admitted in a Israeli major newspaper. FYI. And you can look this stuff up. Please look it up. Do not believe me. Go get the book and read it for yourself and use your discerning mind. Use your common sense. And think about the template of the situation and the technologies, what I'm reading here, then and think about what they're doing now with the beast computers and artificial intelligence and Jade Helm 15, where they were using all this software to make decisions and using metadata to know whose door to go knock on, pretending martial law, getting people to give up their guns, the Boston bombing, that event, and so many others. They're doing the same thing now they did back in 1930 to 1940 prior to World War II. It looks like they're preparing for World War III. And even last week with President Donald Trump sending an aircraft carrier and a fleet of ships offshore of Iran for intimidations and a squadron of bombers for intimidation. You know, eventually Iran or somebody's going to slip up, or a false flag, a false event will be created, like shooting a missile at a oil tanker. A couple of those got hit last week, blaming Iran. And then they'll start World War III, and then they'll implement, even in America, all over the world, these international orders, and the metadata will determine who's who gets rounded up, who gets exterminated, killed immediately. So the red dot, yellow dot, and the green dot. Of course, if you have a red dot, you're in trouble. Hundreds of disenfranchised middle-class German Jews from the provinces tried to reestablish themselves in Berlin with small retail businesses. All right, continuing on. Former boot manufacturers reappeared in shoe shops, liquidated apparel makers set up as haberdashers, evicted professors opened bookstores. As soon as the Nazis discovered these shoestring enterprises, customers were frightened away and the assets targeted for confiscation. Jewish shops were defaced with painted epithets exclaiming, "Jewish swine, out with the Jews." Not infrequently, armed stormtroopers blockaded the doorways. So there's no question, prior to World War II, somebody was trying to get the Jews to leave Germany, Austria, etc. One day, the world awoke to headlines reporting a massive racist display as several miles of Berlin's main shopping streets were obstructed with crude, 3-foot-high signs identifying exactly which stores were owned by Jews. Nazi agitators always seemed to know if owners were Jewish, no matter how new the stores. So Hitler got into power because he had the assistance of the banksters, Illuminati, Zionist leaders. There's no doubt. Max Warburg and other people, Eustace Mullins and many other books describe all of this. There's no doubt. And apparently Nazi, and A is for National Socialism. Socialism, similar to communism. What was going on in Russia at the same time. And the ZI is for Zionism, according to Eustace Mullins. It was news to me. And then, of course, they have a coin with the agreement, celebrating the agreement, with the Nazi symbol on one side, a SWAT sticker, and the 6-pointed star on the other. And that reminds me of the coin that's out now with President Donald Trump's head on it, with King Cyrus's head on it. Why do these idiots just put the evidence right out there for us to see it? And it says Balfour above President Donald Trump's head. The King Solomon's Temple's in the background behind President Donald Trump. And it also says Declaration up there by Donald Trump's head. That would be Donald Trump's declaration that the U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So they put the symbols out there. The coin back there with the deal made with Hitler, with the SWAT sticker and the 6-pointed star for Zionism on it. And then the coin now, you think people would wake up and say, wait a minute, they're telling us what they're doing. And even the Shahendran calling on the leaders of America to start enforcing the Noahide laws, which explicitly say that heresy, believing in a false deity, is punishable by beheading. And apparently, if you go listen to the rabbis talking about the rebuilding of King Solomon's Temple, there's plenty of videos on YouTube. I guarantee you won't have to look very far. They still mock and say that I can't even believe those Christians still believe in Jesus and all that. So that's what they believe. And the Noahide laws says believing in a false deity that they believe is a false deity is punishable by beheading. And apparently America has purchased a lot of guillotines. So I went on Yahoo image site and I put in there American guillotines. And oh my God, OMG. You don't have to look very hard. And then back then they were having all these camps set up for the Jews. In America we have all these FEMA camps. Back then they were using punch card machines and sophisticated computers and thousands of employees to catalog all these little nuances of data for all those Jewish people. And today they're doing that to all of us with all the metadata, all the computers, facial recognition, what you purchase, your computer's watching, your iPhone's watching, your smartphone, your smart meter, your smart car, your smart refrigerator, the cameras at the stoplights, and down the city streets. Orlando just had something where they were continuing their facial recognition system. So there you have it. You watch the TV programs and the movies. Unless you just want to be in complete denial, it is happening. They are preparing. So check out this clip about the guillotines. It's just a bit disturbing to think about this stuff. I totally agree with that. Hello and welcome to another word search on the Yahoo image site. Today's word is modern American guillotines purchased. I kid you not. What kind of world do we live in? True or false? Did the U.S. government purchase 30,000? Guillotines at U.S. military bases, FEMA camps 2019. Modern guillotines set up in FEMA camps. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Luke 21:36. What the heck is in our future? The facts you need to know. So there's plenty of pictures on the Yahoo image site. This is just insane. Isn't this 2019? Aren't we civilized human beings? FEMA camps, districts set up, federal regional councils, Executive Order 11647, 1972. A lot of people reporting on FEMA camps. Fields of coffins. New proof of U.S. soldier exposes USA FEMA camps. 30,000. Martial law, is it coming? Here's a little plaque about Noahide laws. Provision for execution of people, Gentiles guilty of adultery, and blasphemy against God. So they don't want you to believe that Jesus is God or Jesus is the Savior. You can go look at this picture, Modern Guillotines in America, must watch YouTube. Being interpreted, behead Christians who believe that Jesus Christ is God in the flesh and divine. You heard me mention this. You can go look up the pictures I just showed you. Crazy pictures? So what do you think? True or false? Did you look into this? Did you watch some videos?
Is this true or false? Why did the US government recently purchase 30,000 guillotines? The use of guillotines for governmental purposes was lobbied for and passed in the US Congress. The information we received is that 15,000 are currently stored in Georgia and 15,000 in Montana. Are the beheadings by Muslims today meant to desensitize us against US government beheadings in the future? According to the article, it says the following. HB 1274 authorizes the state of Georgia to execute citizens by guillotine. Georgia House of Representatives 1995-1996 sessions. HB 1274 death penalty, guillotine provisions code sections the 17th of October 2038 / the 17th of October 2044, a bill to be entitled an Act 1-1 to amend Article 2 of Chapter 10 of...
So what do you think? True or false? I'm sure there's many other videos on YouTube and many websites. Might behoove us to look into this. You think? Rick Miracle reporting. Well, what do you think? Concerning? Oh my. Back to the book. Page 139. Yet for the Hitler regime, the pace of Jewish destruction was still not swift enough nor sufficiently complete. Although Germany's professing Jews had been identified, thousands of so-called racial Jews, with Jewish ancestors dating back to the prior century, had yet to be marked. So somebody wanted to filter these people out with the Jewish DNA with a fine-tooth comb. Probably people who didn't even remember they were Jewish, didn't have anything to do with Jewish, were probably Christians. Somebody was after the DNA quite sophisticatedly. And they're doing the same thing now. They're trying to get DNA on everybody. And they're trying to get more Jewish people all over the world. You can go watch some of the leaders over there saying that Israel is the only safe place on the world for the Jewish people. This is recent stuff. In 1937, the Reich, the Third Reich, ordered another nationwide censor that would prepare the country for a military mobilization, and for the Jews would be the final and decisive identification step. The wealthy Zionist, Illuminati, secret society elites who control the American politicians and the big corporations were financing this, orchestrating this technical research. Probably people probably don't think about it from that perspective. Dehomug eagerly agreed to organize the project, so it was called a project. The racial portion of the census was designed to pinpoint ancestral Jews as defined by the Nuremberg laws, ensuring no escape from the Reich's anti-Semitism campaign. Now, why would the Germans be concerned with people who didn't even know they were Jewish, were Christian, were proud Germans, didn't want to leave? What logical reason would they want to do that? These people who were loyal Germans and Christians, their ancestors might have been Jewish, were not a threat to Germany. Think about the other purpose, this bigger goal. In addition to the usual census questions, A special card asked whether any of the individual's grandparents were Jewish. When completely filled out, the card would be isolated in a separate envelope for processing by both the census authorities and security offices. The project, originally scheduled for May 1938, would be an enormous undertaking for IBM, International Business Machines, requiring a huge expansion of manpower, machinery, and processing space. So you would think if this was just Germany and Hitler and not in bed with the Zionists with these other goals, money was tight back then. This had to cost a fortune, and they had to build all these technological machines. Somebody had a eugenics project in mind. Not your average everyday anti-Semite citizen who might be even believing the propaganda in the newspapers. This is a sophisticated technological investigation endeavor, all the way lining up with rebuilding King Solomon's temple so they can sacrifice animals and have this Shekinah entity maybe get back in the box, the Ark of the Covenant, and the cloud of glory hover over the sacrifice, and the beam of lightning consume the sacrifice. Just saying, it is what it is. I worked pretty hard trying to figure out this Jewish religion, and the word Jew didn't show up till after 1700. Created around the same time that the word anti-Semite created. And Theodore Herschel said anti-Semitism is our best friend because it'll help motivate and move all these Jews from all over the world into this Palestine territory to create the state of Israel. They had a plan for 300 years. This is all part of the plan. Before World War II. And they even had a book I went over, and I think YouTube took that video down. But you can go look it up on the internet. Germany Must Perish. Go to archive.org and get a free copy. It's not that many pages. You can print it out. And all kinds of other stuff in the newspapers all across America and the world. They were saying 6 million Jews are in danger, threat of being exterminated prior to World War II. Meanwhile, thousands and thousands and thousands were treated harshly so that they would voluntarily get on a ship and leave. It was that difficult to get them to leave. They liked being in Germany. They liked being a German citizen. This was a force push out of Germany. And it wasn't apparently the Third Reich, Hitler and Goring and all those people ideas. And apparently those people who were being financed by these Illuminati Kabbalistic Jewish elites who were into this Illuminati mystical religion, so was Hitler into the Vril Society, Thule Society, these mystical cults. So you think they were into the same thing? All anti-Christian, anti-Christian in America today. Shahendran over in Israel today calling on enforcement of Noahide laws. The evidence of purchased guillotines, FEMA camps, artificial intelligence, software, metadata, 5G, and so much more. 70 sorties. So it was a huge project taken by IBM, requiring huge expansion, manpower, machinery, and processing space. 70 sorters, some 60 tabulators, 76 multipliers, 90 million punch cards would be needed for the RM 3.5 million contract. IBM supervisors in Geneva, and Geneva is apparently the long-term homeland of the Illuminati. Interestingly enough, that's where the collider is in CERN, even the origin of the Frankenstein myth, and so much more. FYI, IBM supervisors in Geneva, Stockholm, and New York understood how difficult the challenge would be. IBM leaders, businessmen in New York and Geneva, Switzerland, understood how big the challenge would be. Somebody wanted to sort the Jews from the rest of us. God's chosen people, so they believe. I guess that would be a really serious reason to sort out the difference and get them to move to Israel, God's chosen people, so that this God living in the box, the Shekinah, and the cloud of glory could show up, and the lightning bolts and the beam of fire, fulfillment of prophecy. Just using my brain thinking, putting all this together. A memo from IBM's European factory manager J.G. Johnson to IBM New York supervisors in Sweden specified, "We also have to raise considerable funds for the financing of the RM 3.5 million census order." Oh boy, so millions of dollars this was going to cost. Even though the Third Reich payments would be distributed over a 15-month period, so somebody was putting the German leaders up to this and wanted to know who was who in Germany. I just don't think it was actually the Germans' idea. Interestingly enough, after World War II, a lot of the German scientists were rounded up and brought to America, and Britain got some, and Russia got some, etc., France. In Project Paperclip, they set up little cities and laboratories all over the United States, continuing the science and research of those German scientists that were in bed with the Kabbalist, Illuminati, people into the occult, coming up with the Nikola Tesla technologies. Even Nikola Tesla said, "I'm not really the gene you should think I am." He said it on stage, and Mr. Morgan went up there and dragged him off the stage. He said, "I have visions, and I hear things, and I see things, and I have dreams." Some entities were communicating with Nikola Tesla. Where's where the technologies came from? And that's how I got into this investigation in the first place. I didn't plan on getting into the conspiracy angle of this. I was interested in science. I have an electronic technology degree. I worked at a major aerospace for 10 years. And I was always interested in alternate energies other than nuclear power or gas and oil. Advanced, electrical waves and things like that fascinated me. Anti-gravity. I guess kind of normal stuff for young boys and girls these days. Science. But every time I looked at some of these famous scientists, people throughout history, they were always seemingly involved into the occult and psychic abilities. And their parents were usually related to an organization like a church where they were praying and all this. And I thought, wait a minute, who the heck doesn't know this? Probably nobody knows this. All these famous people that were the scientists were in there, they were having psychic experiences. Their parents were into praying and churching and these different religious cults. And apparently over there in the Western Russia, Eastern European area, that whole area, Ukraine, Poland, Belarus, and part of Russia, the psychic abilities was off the charts. That's where it all started out. Apparently what they did before the U.S. caught on to this is they were beaming microwave pulses at the U.S. Embassy in Russia, Moscow. Beep, 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 of microwave transmitters. They called it the woodpecker. Beep, you can go look it up. And it was causing the government employees at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow to get nosebleeds and sick and cancer. It was killing them. And that's when the USA woke up and said, whoa, we got to get into these technologies also. So not only were they involved into the high-frequency weaponized technologies, but they were also highly into the psychic research and channeling and in communicating with these otherworldly beings, like Aleister Crowley and that being that looks like a gray alien, Lamb, Iowas. So you can't divide these two stories and separate them and say they're not connected with all these mystery religion and organizations and all these things they're doing in America, putting all these satanic symbols up everywhere, and apparently on the posters for the pro-communist activity during the 20s and 30s with all the pictures of the five-pointed star. And if you go look up Freemasons and Rosicrucians, alchemy, Kabbalah, you'll find the five-pointed star. Apparently, through my investigation, it's used interchangeably with the six-pointed star on the Israeli flag. And according to my research, it represents Moloch, mentioned in the Bible, where they were sacrificing their sons and daughters to this demon. And it represents the fallen angel Raphael. Just stuff we probably need to pay attention to. So it says here, even though the Reich payments would be distributed over a 15-month period, other IBM executives seem to sense that the forthcoming racial census would represent a project so far-reaching it would be the last of its kind, and therefore IBM's investment would have to plan for a temporary surge. So they had this big contract that was going to be a huge amount of work, and after they were done tallying up who everybody was in Germany and Austria, etc., the project would end. So they would have to hire a bunch of people, build all the machines, and print out all the cards, and tally up the data. And then as far as the last of its kind, it looks like that's what they're doing today with the computerized beast systems and collecting metadata, the internet, and all this other stuff, smart meters, smartphones, and tracking everything people say and do, and probably even listening to me on this right now. So it says they were going to have a temporary surge in work for this huge racial computerized census involving IBM from New York and Geneva, Switzerland. Big corporations, and obviously in cahoots with a lot of elite leaders all over the world. Zionism was a big thing. They needed to get people all over the world to move. Even Theodore Herschel said anti-Semitism is our best friend. The initiator, creator of Zionism. The Nazi establishment was ecstatic about the implications for German Jewry. In May of next year, bragged the leading NSDAP newspaper, the largest and most comprehensive census will take place. It will be larger and more comprehensive than Germany and even the rest of the world has ever known, it says here. It is the duty of every Volkskomrade to answer every single question completely and truthfully, thus giving the Führer and his colleagues the basis for future legislation for the next 5 to 10 years. So they're saying to the citizens, we need this data because we need to, make laws and help you out. Make Germany strong again and powerful, so we need you to fill out all these little questionnaires. They put it all on punch cards. And the machine sorted out who was who. And they were rounding up Jewish people that nobody knew was Jewish. They only knew it because of this census data. One Nazi bureaucrat enthused, the general census of 38 is intended to also determine the bloodwise configuration of the German population. And remember, these kinds of things are going on now in the world. Even microchipping children in California, Texas, and Florida. I learned that 2012 and 13. So they're probably doing it everywhere and collecting blood samples from everybody, everywhere. Computerized data, beast computers. The results could also be recorded on the police department's technical registration cards. The police would thus gain an insight into the racial composition of the persons living in their jurisdictions. And this would also accomplish the goals set by the main office of the security police. And I have no intention of doing an audio book. I encourage people to go buy this book. IBM and the Holocaust, Edwin Black, a New York Times bestseller. Let's give credit where credit is due. Thank you, Edwin Black, for writing this book and doing that research. It had to take years and years. But the much anticipated May 1938 census was delayed. On March 13, 1938, the Third Reich absorbed Austria, creating a greater Germany of 73 million people. Speaking of greater Germany, go look up Greater Israel, ancient kingdom of Judea, from the Iraqi Euphrates down to the Egyptian Nile. And you'll know what the plan is. The Odin Yin plan and all this stuff. Greater Israel. There's much more to the story than people can fathom. Hitler called it the Ausschluss, the annexation. The anti-Semitic program that he had evolved over the years in Germany now rapidly took hold of the Austrian provinces, virtually overnight. First came the violence. Jewish merchants were rounded up and publicly beaten, their stores looted. Venice crowds cheered when Jewish men and women were forced to their knees to scrub streets as rifle butts flailed them. So it's amazing, when things like this happen, that even the Austrian and German citizens would condone such a thing. But let's not forget the suffering that Germany had suffered from the Versailles Treaty after World War I was absolutely incredible and crushed Germany and caused a lot of pain and suffering to the people. Do you think they forgot that? And even during the Versailles Treaty hearings, people found out that the Jewish people had betrayed Germany during World War I with the Balfour Agreement. Well, before I continued on with this book review, I wanted to share something that I discovered at a particular website, Global 100 Anti-Defamation-League.org, public/ADL Global 100 Executive Summary. So an index of anti-Semitism, taking a little snapshot of what they think of us today. The Anti-Defamation League, Global 100. A Global 100, a survey of attitudes towards Jews in over 100 countries around the world. Total population of countries surveyed, almost 6 billion, 85.9% of the world's population. Total adult population, 4,161,000,000, you can see the numbers, 88.4%. Survey conducted in countries which account for 96.9% of the world's GDP, gross national product. Surveys conducted 9 out of 10 most popular countries in the world. Why would they do this? Anti-Defamation League, Global 100 countries by region. So you have all these countries you can select, and they've determined the percentage of anti-Semitism everywhere. So apparently, the countries that were not included are in light blue here. Looks like a lot of Africa was not included. Pakistan, maybe, that area. Afghanistan, not included. Ecuador, not included. Honduras, not included. But the rest of the world is included. Index scores were created by asking whether the following negative stereotypes are probably true or probably false. Respondents who said at least 6 out of 11 statements are probably true are considered to harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. So people don't think They're taking kind of census today of all of the people. Why would they be doing that? Why did they do it back during World War II? So here are some of the stereotypes. Jews are more loyal to Israel than to this country or the countries they live. What's your answer to that one? I would guess to say it's probably 50-50. A lot of Jews are not awake to what's really going on in the world. They just want to be normal citizens. Jews have too much power in the business world. I think most people would agree yes there. So that's one strike for me. Jews have too much power in international finance. Yes, that's 2 strikes for me. If I get 6 out of 11, I guess I'm anti-Semitic. Jews don't care what happens to anyone but their own kind. Again, 50-50. Some are hateful. Some follow the propaganda. Some don't know. Jews have too much control over global affairs. Yes, that's 3 strikes for me. People hate Jews because of the way Jews behave. Again, 50-50. Some people, like all people, behave badly, and some people behave okay. Jews think they are better than other people. I'm going to go with 50-50 on that one too. Some do, some don't. Jews have too much control over the United States government. That was admitted on CNN. Absolutely yes. Another strike for me. Jews have too much control over the global media. CNN report recently. Apparently that's all true. Everybody knows that, so that's a yes. 5 strikes for me. 6, and apparently I'm an anti-Semitic. Jews still talk too much about what happened to them in the Holocaust. Again, I'll give that 50-50. There are the evil Zionist forces against the other half of the Jews of the world who don't know. All right, number 11. Jews are responsible for most of the world wars. Well, I'll have to say 50-50 there. Not all of people are aware of what happened. So that's 5 for me, so I didn't get 6 strikes. Well, I'm happy to see that. All right, ADL Global 100. The overall ADL Global 100 index score is 26%. Got 6 out of 11. Probably true. 26 of the world anti-Semitic. Average regional index scores in the Middle East, 74%. And I would guess so after 9/11. Oh my goodness. Eastern Europe, 34%. Western Europe, that would be England, Britain, France, 24%. America's 19%. So we're not very anti-Semitic. Greece, 69%. 13% combined index score for English-speaking countries. 26% harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. That's 109 billion people. 35% never heard of the Holocaust. So about a billion, 0.5 never heard of it. So you can go look at this website and look at all the details. Just thought it was interesting. Respondents that never heard of the Holocaust, 54%. They break it all down into details. Why would they do this? Why would they be gathering this data? Do these people think that they control the world? Quite a lot of information here, as you can see. Semitic attitudes. The Americas are 19%. Eastern Europe, 34%. Well, they would know better there and have more harsher feelings after World War I and World War II. They break it down by countries. Tunisia, 86%. Iraq, 92%. You think? Turkey, 69%. Venezuela, 30%. Spain, 29%. I guess the more you're affected, the more your attitude changes. They break it all down into details. Are you curious? What do you think? Why are they gathering all this data? What kind of legislation and laws do they want passed? Who will use this data? Maybe to make it hate speech to talk about these people in America, like they've already been talking about? Another country, the president almost signed legislation but backed down at the last minute in the news recently. So thank you for watching my review of that website. Go take a look at it. Rick Miracle reporting. Oh my, what are we to think? Guillotines, FEMA camps, and taking a census of the world's people to find out who is anti-Semitic. Collecting a lot of data, just like they did back then. Back to the book. Page 1 headlines in the New York Times immediately decried an orgy of Jew baiting. The article described sadistic cruelties calculated to coerce Jews into immediately immigrating penniless to anywhere. In Vienna and Austria, the New York Times declared, no vestige of decency or humanity has checked the will to destroy. And there has been an unbroken orgy of Jew baiting such as Europe has not known since the darkest days of the Middle Ages. So the Jews were doing good in Germany before World War I. So who turned all this around? You think the citizens turned it around, or was there some outside forces that wanted to bring about the Zionist state of Israel, involving apparently some satanic, demonic, religious connections? Just saying. Okay. Then came the arrest. Thousands of Jews were extracted from their homes and offices and loaded onto wagons and shipped to concentration camps such as Dacha, where they suffered bestial tortures, starvation, and back-breaking labor. The camps, too, were designed to convince Austrian Jews to leave the country, should they ever be released from incarceration. And only those who promised to immigrate at once were considered for release. So they were torturing, treating the Jews badly, so they would voluntarily leave Germany, Austria, etc. And they, at the same time, they had been promised the Palestine territories by the British government if the British government would win World War I. And the Jews in Germany during World War I were told that. Leaflets were dropped from planes, pamphlets were handed out. The Jews all over Germany knew that they would get their promised land if Germany would lose the war. And this came out during the Versailles Treaty trials, and the Germans were shocked to find out the betrayal and the game that was up to get the Palestinians' land. Do you see this, how important this is? And even President Donald Trump making a declaration that the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and Jerusalem calling on Russia and America and all the other countries to help rebuild King Solomon's temple, passed Noahide laws saying we can't talk about these people and say these things and tell the truth. The truth is treason. Back to the book. The camps, too, were designed to convince Austrian Jews to leave the country should they ever be released, and only those who promised to immigrate at once were considered for release. When the pace of immigration was not quick enough, Jews in Austria provinces were simply expelled from their homes with no notice. So there were some outside forces making this happen. More than 3,000 Jewish men, women, and children in Burgenland region of Austria, many with roots dating back to many centuries, were loaded onto trucks and driven to Jewish quarter in Vienna, and summarily dumped there. The Vienna Jewish community housed them in the synagogues and other buildings as best they could, but the weather was usually cold and many of the children suffered extreme exposure and near starvation from the ordeal. On June 30th, 1938, nearly 10,000 Jewish-owned businesses in Austria were ordered to immediately fire all Jewish employees, 30,000 men and women, and replace them with Aryans. The mass media described heartbreaking scenes across Vienna. As trusted Jewish employees, many of 10 and 20 years' tenure, were suddenly ousted without warning or severance. So this was all a plan. And apparently the cooperation with the German leadership, who were put in power by these elitist Zionist Jewish folks, were the ones that wanted to make it difficult so the Jews would go to Palestine, some to America, Britain, where they would be away from Germany, maybe making money, joining the Zionist organizations, stripping Jewish citizens of their dignity, possessions, and legal status. And I don't doubt that all of this happened. No one was spared. Middle-class Jews from Sigmund Freud to nameless victims were forced to board any ship, train, or bus out of Austria, with no possessions other than what they could carry. Once Jews were identified, their lives in Austria was over. Suicide became a frequent alternative. In the first 10 days of German annexation, 96 persons committed suicide. As more Jews found themselves dispossessed or facing the prospect of going to the Camp Dacha, they entered into suicide pacts, even suicide clubs. With stunning precision, the Nazis knew exactly who in Austria was Jewish. Now, who would know that, other than the elite Jewish people wanting a Zionist state of Israel? Do you know who's Jewish in your neighborhood, in your school? Of course you don't. Most of us would never ask people stuff like that. Who's Catholic or Protestant or atheist? But these people with a huge global world order plan, a 300-year plan for a new world order, destroying Christianity and anti-God people, they would know. Indeed, the New York Times, in its initial coverage of the roundups, could not help but comment. Many of these patrols are engaged in roundups, the thousands on list of those due for imprisonment and correction. Those lists were compiled quietly, year after year, in preparation for the day of Germany's seizure of power. So this was planned years before Hitler came into power. Oh my. They didn't get what they wanted during World War I. Albert Pike in 1880 said it would take 3 world wars to bring about the New World Order. He was into the occult. He was communicating with some beings called masters. Can they see the future? IBM was in Austria. Before Hitler came to power, the company was represented by an agency called Firth and Company, operated in part by Stefan Firth. But in 1933, after Hitler declared the Third Reich, Watson established a wholly owned IBM subsidiary in Austria, the owner of IBM. Firth then went to the United States to undergo sales training with the IBM in New York. Shortly afterwards, Firth returned to Vienna as a co-manager of the new wholly owned IBM subsidiary. This subsidiary had the benefit of one of IBM's most talented punch card engineers, Gustav Tuschek, and manager Victor Firth. Another Dohamug-trained manager named Berthold later joined Firth. In 1934, IBM undertook the Austrian census. 2 years later, Watson approved a card printing plant for the country. This is no small thing. So who do you think? Average citizens are running around anti-Semitic, having all the money to create this huge effort for this census to determine who is who? Who was it serving the benefit? Who wanted something here? The Zionists needed the people to populate Palestine. In early 1938, in the weeks leading up to the March Auschwitz, Adolf Eichmann was dispatched to Vienna as a specialist on Jewish affairs to organize forced Jewish immigration. Once in Vienna, he forced an enormous punch card operation, working around the clock. The Hollerith program superseded every other aspect of German preparations. For weeks in advance of the Auschwitz, remembered Eichmann, every able-bodied man they could find was put to work in 3 shifts. Wow, they were in a hurry, weren't they? Writing file cards for an enormous circular file several yards in diameter, where a man sitting at a piano stool could operate and find any card he wanted thanks to the system of punch holes. All information important for Austria was entered into these cards. The data was taken from annual reports, handbooks, newspapers of all the political parties, membership files, in short, everything imaginable. Think about the beast computer systems they have today. The smart meter outside your house, your smartphone, your smart TV, your smart car. They're watching us. They're readying for something. Just as fast as they were doing it back then, they're moving that fast now. Putting up the 5G network everywhere, microwave transmission system, which apparently can be weaponized. Everybody's hooked up to digital debit cards, credit cards, money. Everybody will be controlled. This is aligning perfectly with prophecy. No man will be able to buy or sell without the mark of the beast. Each card carried name, address, party membership, whether Jew, Freemason, or practicing Catholic or Protestant, whether politically active, whether this or whether that. During that period, our regular work was put on ice. The German racial census, scheduled for May 1938, was postponed a year to allow Dogoma to draw up new plans to count the population of Austria as well. Dohamug opened several addition branches throughout the Greater Reich to accommodate the extra load. More than 25 offices would tackle the task of profiling the expanded base of some 70 million Germans and Austrians. Hitler's regime of terror against the Jews continued throughout 1938, to the continuing astonishment of the world. The final stage of confiscation was launched on April 27th as the Third Reich ordered Jews to register virtually all possessions. Hollerith machines were kept busy tabulating assets. So they were using these machines, these IBM cards, to even tabulate all of the assets of the Jewish people. Why would they do that? A thief doesn't tally everything up. Germany didn't want all their stuff. Why would they keep a record? It's because with the transfer agreement, it was agreed that once they got the Jews to Palestine, that all of their assets that had been seized would be reimbursed. And interestingly enough, after World War II, that's exactly what happened. They've been billing Germany for all those records ever since. So who do you think really benefited by making those records? Just saying. Conditions in Nazi Germany became even more nightmarish. Beheading was adopted as the dreaded new punishment for the unappealable People's Court. So So they were beheading people who were resisting, which adjudicated in secret but announced its executions to the world media as a warning to all those the Third Reich considered special enemies. Wow. So I got a couple other little clips I'll play to finish out this 2 hours. But go get this book and get educated. Be concerned. Be very concerned. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting. Hello and welcome to another Yahoo image word search. And believe it or not, desiring to rebuild King Solomon's temple and acquire the Palestine's land for their new state of Israel. Apparently, they're the ones responsible for putting Hitler in power. I know what you're thinking. You're crazy. Well, I've been paying attention, listening to people. So here you got a Palestine coin with the six-pointed star. Here you have a six-pointed star and a swastika. It gets even crazier. So you got all these pictures. You can click the links and get the details. But see this one on the left, the six-pointed star? Here's the crazy part. The N stands for the NA, the National Socialist. Now remember, the socialist or communist. Not the socialist a lot of people think is socialist. National Socialist, Germany. The ZI is for Zionist. They united to put Hitler in power, and they had something called the Transfer Agreement. So the Hitler regime was assisting the Zionist Jews to convince the Jews in Germany to move to Palestine. The coin that the Nazis struck after the successful journey and stay for 6 months in 1933 of Baron von Mittelstein, who became head of the Jewish desk of the SS Security Service of Germany now in 1935 as a guest of the Kabutzin German coin. Six-pointed star, Palestine. Looks like the Vril Society here. So there's more here than meets the eye. When people want to try to figure out WTH, what the heck is going on? The Havara Agreement, Hebrew, the Transfer Agreement. So in 1933, 7 years before World War II, Germany made an agreement with the Zionists, and it was the Zionists that got Hitler in power. You can see the coin. That he was going to assist the Zionist Jews in getting the Jews in Germany. 50% of the Jews in Germany were probably Orthodox Jewish people, and they did not want to be Zionist or leave their beautiful homes and go live in the desert. So there had to be a lot of convincing, and as we know, World War II and so much more anti-Semitism created was probably a lot of convincing. So the transfer agreement was signed 25 August 1933. After 3 months of talks by the Zionist Federation of Germany and the Anglo-Palestine Bank under the directive of the Jewish Agency and the economic authorities of Nazi Germany. The agreement was designed to help facilitate the immigration of German Jews to Palestine, 7 years before World War II. And during World War II, they were claiming that 6 million Jews were put in gas chambers by the Germans. That's not what this story is telling me. While it helped Jews immigrate, it forced them to temporarily give up possessions to Germany before departing. Those possessions could later be reobtained by transferring them to Palestine as German export goods. The commemorative coin of the Haravara Transfer Agreement of 1933 between the Zionist and the Third Reich. Wow, here's a 6-pointed coin with the 6-pointed star on the coin with the 5-pointed star upside down. The 5-pointed star upside down is supposed to represent Satan. This one's right side up on the bottom. This one's upside down. So much to learn trying to figure out. Here's the certificate of the agreement, I guess. The transfer office. A signed agreement. So anybody can go to this website. I'm clicking the link and waiting. Tony Goldstein's blog. When Ken Livingstone got it right over Nazi support for Zionism. So that's not what they try to teach us. The Jewish Western Bulletin, Morgan, David, and SWAT sticker to fly side by side. Wow, a lot of stuff on this page to learn. So there you have it. What do you think you know about World War II? And what are the Zionists doing today in June 14th, 2019, calling on America and Russia and the world to help them rebuild King Solomon's temple? Is this concerning? Rick Miracle reporting. I wanted to listen a little bit more to this video. I was continuing my watching it and found some more valuable information. Eustace Mullins, video at archive.org. Why the Rothschilds Invented Nazism, Eustace Mullins. And earlier in the video, he pointed out something interesting. Do you know what Nazi means? The NA means nationalism, socialism, which socialism is a variation of communism. But the ZI, who would have thunk this? It's a clear connection. ZI is for Zionism. So the banksters, Illuminati Zionist, put Hitler in power, and he made a deal with the Zionists to do what they did there. So it was the Zionist and the National Socialist. And the deal was they wanted to coerce the Jews living in Germany to move to Palestine. And again, I said earlier, 50% of the Jews in the world back then, plus or minus, were opposed to Zionism, were happy where they were, had assimilated with the rest of us quite nicely, were hugely successful. They lived in huge estates and mansions. They did not want to move to the desert. So the National Socialists, Germany, Hitler, that the banksters put in power, isn't that a twist of events? Made a deal with the Zionists, the ZI, and Eustace Mullins says this. But listen up to what he's talking about.
I haven't run into religious people at all.
You haven't, but they do use religion as a smokescreen, don't they?
Well, I always use religion. Religion is a perfect smokescreen because you can say whatever you're doing for God, and who could criticize you for that?
Well, that seems to be what's happened then.
Oh, yeah,
And,
exactly what happened.
well, and I also understand that there are nonsensical ideas that they want to reestablish the Temple Mount after they've consolidated their power in the Middle East.
Oh, they certainly do. All those plans are in formation right now.
They are.
Oh, yes.
And to reestablish that Temple Mount, to who welcomed the Rothschilds to the leadership role in that area?
Well, the Rothschilds had the leadership role in that area since 1880. The whole idea with Jewish homeland in Palestine was financed by the Rothschilds.
And remember, it was the Rothschilds and others who, after 50 years of not having control of America's money supply from around 1850 to 1913, probably 1860, and that's probably one of the reasons Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He wanted America to coin its own money, and President John Kennedy even came up with the silver dollar, or the silver-backed dollar, and he wanted America to coin its own money because they knew that the people who controlled America's money controlled America, the politicians, and everything. So it was a huge conspiracy, not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact, that they do control America's purse string. Hence, they control the politicians. They can make or break anybody. They can bribe anybody. They can ruin the economy. And they have. Listen on.
From Vienna in 1880. See, there was never a penny put up by the Jewish community itself for settling in Palestine because the Jews were very happy in Europe. They had no reason to go to Palestine. If you're living in a beautiful modern city, why would you want to go live in a desert? I mean, they're not crazy.
Well, that makes sense. And a desert, in fact, that is being fought over.
Oh, yes. Still being fought over because it's still the crucial area in the world. You control Europe and Asia from that area.
Yeah.
So geopolitically, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense from economic sense. It does make sense even from geography. You have to know geopolitical goals in order to understand what's going on with that. And the American people have no conception of geopolitics whatsoever.
Yeah, that's pretty evident. Now let's go to Myron Fagan's work here. He actually does a chronology or a timeline, as it were, for what he describes, not Zionism. He describes it more as the Illuminati or these Council on Foreign Relations. But aren't these just creations of the same Zionist leadership?
Oh yes, the Illuminati and Freemasons all came out of the Rothschilds in Vienna, Austria. And, Myron was trying to focus on the conspiratorial angle of the thing. He was a very brilliant man and one of the finest people I ever met in my life. He was the only person for years who would promote my Federal Reserve book, which appeared in 1953, and was really immediately in the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith unleashed a national campaign against the book. They labeled it as virulent and anti-Semitic, and myself as the worst anti-Semite in history.
By the way, the video I made on Eustace Mullins' book about the Federal Reserve is one of the videos that YouTube deleted off my channel. One of the 25 videos they deleted last week. Today is the 12th of June 2019, Wednesday. So last week was a big surprise. I checked my email and there were 25 notices of the videos that they had deleted and said that they had changed the terms of agreements and the rules about hate speech. So we can't talk about what Eustace Mullins is talking about here, apparently the truth, because the truth is hate speech. And in times like these, apparently the truth is treason. The truth is a crime because they're making laws that say that we can't talk about the truth. We're headed for some dark days, it seems.
So they never quit. They're still saying what they said in 1953, that my book is anti-Semitic, and people read it, pick it up and read it, they can't find an anti-Semitic word in it, so it really puzzles them. But Byron went against the whole establishment because he was an honest man and he believed in what he was doing, and he did it all his life. I knew him in his last years. He had finally left California for New York, and he was living in a one-room place in New York in a poor section.
So I'm going to have to look up that man, Myron Fagan. Apparently investigated all these activities, and Eustace Mullins knew him. Says he was a fine man, and anybody who exposes these things going on is accused of being an anti-Semite. And of course, as we just recently watched in my video, Theodore Herschel says the anti-Semites are the Zionists' best friends because they wake up, they see the truth, and they try to take action and persecute or police the Jewish people, causing turmoil and chaos and anarchy in the world. So they instigate all of this to get a reaction from the people, and that reaction of seeing the truth, those people are accused of being an anti-Semite.
And his home was broken into almost every day.
So there you have it. Please go to archive.org. Look up this video when you type in Eustace Mullins, why the Rothschilds invented Nazism, Eustace Mullins, and many other interviews with Eustace Mullins, and writings, essays, pamphlets, books, all there for free. Thank you for watching this little clip. Rick Miracle reporting. Hello and welcome to another review of a video by Rick Miracle. I discovered something interesting. You can go to archive.org and look up Eustace Mullins and find some very interesting old videos of him being interviewed by different people. So let's listen to this particular one for a few minutes.
And that's why they're so predictable.
But how the heck do they get away with it so cleverly? I mean, how do they do it?
Well, they get away with
How
it.
come the public can't get their brains around this problem?
Well, because they've got control of capital, they've got control of seats of power. And the public cannot get their foot in the door.
Have we ever had our foot in the door, ever?
Well, we've had our foot in the door a couple of times. We had it with Andrew Jackson, and we had it with people like Thomas Jefferson. There's been people who turned up sometimes that did some good. Now, Ezra Pound used to tell me that the last decent American president was Calvin Coolidge. He was a New England boy, became president. He was a very good president. But since then, it's all been downhill.
Oh, boy. Well, when we come back, we're going to have one more segment with Eustace, and we're going to discuss a couple of extra things that we have on our minds here today on the French Connection. When we return, more from Eustace Mullins.
So Eustace Mullins says that we, the public, are not aware of what's really going on because the banksters, Zionist elite, control the money, control our politicians, control the media, control the educational departments, control the churches, control everything. Let's listen.
Well, the bottom line was that the buildup after the 1932-33 battle for the chancellery, which, of course, Hitler was able to take from his well, actually, he killed his way into it, from what I understand, but he was financed, his war machine, his buildup, was financed by these bankers, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Max Warburg and Max Oppenheimer financed everything. And they put aside a mythical story that German industrialists had financed Hitler, which wasn't true. The German industrialists didn't like him and had nothing to do with him.
And remember, Max Warburg, one of the Warburgs, were instrumental in creating the Federal Reserve in 1913, which was not federal. It was controlled by the Illuminati Zionist banksters. So that was before World War I. So when Germany lost World War I, who rebuilt Germany? The Zionist Illuminati banksters. Listen on.
All of his money came from Jewish bankers, which created a paradoxical situation.
Eustace Mullins said it, I didn't. Jewish banksters. And remember, the Jewish community is divided maybe 50-50. The Orthodox Jewish people all over the world are completely opposed to the Zionist plan. And the Zionist Reformed Kabbalah type Illuminati secret society Jewish bankers brought us World War I, World War II, 9/11, and so much more death and destruction. And it looks like they plan on bringing us World War III and more death and destruction.
That you had an anti-Semitic government which was attacking the Jews and was all financed with Jewish money.
Well, now at the time, was anybody aware was this above board or was this kind of clandestine financing?
Oh, this was clandestine. In fact, I only came into it years later after World War II.
Take a moment and read this quote from Theodore Herschel, who wrote the book The State of Israel, the plan to bring us where we are today. It is essential that the sufferings of Jews become worse. So this is the Jewish man, Theodore Herschel, who came up with the Zionist plan to create the State of Israel. So he says it is essential that the sufferings of the Jew become worse. This will assist in realization of our plans. I have an excellent plan. I shall induce anti-Semites to liquidate Jewish wealth. The anti-Semites will assist us thereby in that they will strengthen the persecution and the oppression of Jews. The anti-Semites shall be our best friends. Theodore Herschel in his diaries. So no matter where I look, I keep finding the evidence, what's up here, but people just don't want to admit it.
George Sylvester Birch told me a lot of it. So he was the illegitimate son of Kaiser Wilhelm I.
Who was?
George Sylvester Birch. He represented Germany during both World Wars. I used to kid him that he cost Germany victory in both World Wars, and he was quite flattered when I told him that.
And was he from the same Zionist camp?
Oh, no. He was old European aristocracy.
Ah, okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, I got a few other questions about Mr. Friedman, and then I want to move over to Mr. Untermeyer as well as Mr. Fagan. Ladies and gentlemen, when we return, we have a great resource in Eustace Mullins. Stick with us.
So here he's talking about Benjamin Friedman and his famous speech. And YouTube took down 2 of my videos where I had played his famous speech. So please go online and find Benjamin Friedman's famous speech. And then Mr. Untermeyer, I've been reading one of his documents, of his speeches, and he tells all. He was one of the Zionist elitist Jewish people. And he tells all in a speech. It's amazing how much of this material got out there, but it seems that a lot of Americans just don't want to pay attention. And whatever happens to us, I guess, will be our own fault because we don't want to see what we see. We don't want to hear what we hear. And then he mentions Mr. Fagan. I guess we got a little more by Theodore Herschel. The governments of all countries scourged by anti-Semitism will serve their own interest in assisting us to obtain the sovereignty we want. So they do have the state of Israel now, apparently with nuclear weapons. So they have their sovereignty. Apparently, even in this video, they were involved in 9/11. They are bent on a global world order. Great exhortations will not be necessary to spur the movement. Anti-Semites provide the requisite impetus. They need only to do what they did before, and then they will create a love of immigration where it did not previously exist, and strengthen it where it existed before. So they needed to create all this anti-Semitism and irritations to governments all over the world so that they would support confiscating the Palestinians' lands and help the Jewish people create the state of Israel. So this was all planned. Like World War I, World War II, depressions, recessions, the Civil War in the United States, French Revolution, Russian Revolution, execution of the King of Britain, the execution of the King of France, and so much more. 300 years, this plan has been in place. And it looks like they're succeeding if only people would wake up. Continue on here. I imagine that governments will, either voluntarily or under pressure from the anti-Semites, pay certain attention to this scheme. They may perhaps actually receive it here, and there with a sympathy, which they will also show to the Society of Jews. Theodor Herzl, The Jewish State, 1895. So 125 years since he said this, and it's all coming true.
They figured this homeland was at the crossroads of the world, and that it would control the entire world. That's what it was. It was about world of domination. They weren't just looking for a homeland for the Jewish people. They were looking to dominate the world. You could do it from the crossroads of the world in Palestine.
Are there religious overtones to this?
I have never found any religious overtones in everything.
I disagree with Eustace on that one. But the satanic symbolism seems everywhere. The synagogue of Satan is mentioned in the Bible. And you'd have to almost be demonic and satanic to do what they're doing.
Everything is practical politics. Everybody's after money and power. I haven't run into religious people at all.
You have, but they do use religion as a smokescreen, don't they?
Well, they always use religion. Religion is a perfect smokescreen because you can say whatever you're doing for God, and who could criticize you for that?
Well, that seems to be what's happened then.
Oh, yeah, exactly what happened.
Well,
So go watch this video. Eustace Mullins, archive.org. All his books are there for free. And a lot of the essays, documents he wrote, videos, interviews. I think it's an invaluable resource. Archive.org, Eustace Mullins. So thank you for watching my little review here. Rick Miracle reporting.